Mr. McShay. I teach government and U.S. history at Littleton High School.
Okay, and some questions are, how has voting changed since you voted for the first time?
Well, now there's electronic voting. You can vote by, there's a lot of people that are voting by absentee ballot. And the county where I live, 75% they think of the ballots are going to be cast either absentee ballot or early voting, which is unheard of. Wouldn't have happened a long time ago. I think also this election in particular, there's a lot more urgency with voting. The past two major general election cycles have seen an increase in voter turnout, which was pretty low. I mean, I started voting, my first presidential election was 92 and then 96, and those, as I recall, weren't particularly high turnout elections.
Okay, and like, what do you factor in when you vote?
What do I factor in when I vote? I factor in, the heaviest thing for me is the stance that the candidate takes on issues. So as a teacher, I'm concerned, are they going to support schools? Are they going to increase funding for schools? Are they going to do things to equalize funding for schools? Like a lot of schools that are from wealthier areas get more resources than ones from areas with low property values. I'd like to see the government, federal government, for example, play a larger role in equalizing school funding. I take into account security issues, workers' rights issues, and who's gonna better support working class people is very important to me.
Okay, what problems have you had during this voting process, or the voting process?
I've been very fortunate to live in suburban areas most of my life. I have never had a problem casting a ballot. I have never had to wait in line like a lot of people have to do to vote. So I've been very fortunate in my voting experience.
You know, what about voting makes you uncomfortable?
Nothing
Okay.
makes me uncomfortable about voting. It's just I'm very confident. I do my homework. I wish more people would do research prior to, and not from partisan sources, but from like really non-partisan sources. Examine studies, really look into the candidates' backgrounds, really examine the issues before casting the vote. I fear that too many people vote as a social act instead of voting as an act of civic responsibility.
Wait, what is it like seeing the seniors get ready to vote for the first time? Or what advice do you try and give them?
Again, to do their homework. It's very exciting. I love watching people engage in the political process. I think that if more people got engaged in the political process, our politicians would owe us more. I mean, if more of us went out there and knocked doors and more of us went out there and made phone calls for candidates, the politicians would be beholden to us and not to moneyed special interests. And I think we'd have a qualitatively different government as a result. So when I see my seniors who have to do volunteer projects, when I see them get involved in civic activity, it's very important to me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathy Prestel. I teach 9th grade early civ and geography and film history and IB world history.
Okay. How has voting changed since you voted for the first time?
As far as I know, it hasn't. I'm still voting the same way. I'm looking at the little blue book and I'm going to my precinct and doing my voting.
Okay. What do you factor in when you vote?
What do I personally factor in? My party, and whether it's going to be good for the overall good of the country, and I guess the record, like if I'm voting for a person, their record as a judge, if I'm voting for a judge, or what their records were as a politician or a lawyer or whatever. So background of the candidates.
What is it like seeing the seniors get ready for their first vote?
Oh, I always love seeing the seniors get ready for their first vote because they're trying to figure out first of all, trying to figure out what the amendments say because they are so much full of political wording and not this and that means yes and all the double negatives, and I think it's interesting, the process, because they have to do some heavy duty reading and some background.
What kind of advice do you try to give them?
To do the background reading and to really look at their all the help they get from from the infamous Blue Book and all the help they can get from the internet and any magazines and news shows, so they understand exactly what they're voting for, especially on the amendments, because they'll affect them more than anything.
Have you ever had any trouble or problems during the voting process?
Well, when I lived in Brazil, it was hard to get to my embassy because I had to fill out an absentee ballot, and so our embassy had just a couple of nights to do it, and not very well communicated, which is kind of part of Brazil. But so yeah, that was the only problems I've ever had voting.
Why do you choose to vote?
Because it's one of my civic duties. I think that being a citizen of the United States, I need to vote to take action in how we are governed.